Today my topic is the planned economy, land, labor, industry and education. By the time the British imperialism had withdrawn from India, it had systematically destroyed all the fibres and fabrics and foundations of the Indian society and economy. Particularly the Indian economy was in shambles. In 1947, above 50% of the Indian population lived in abject poverty. 22% of the rural household did not have any land. 25% of the rural household owned less than 1 acre of land, while 13% of the big farmhouses in India owned two-thirds of the total land area. The Nehru government felt the necessity of a planned economy for mitigating the economic crisis and the crisis faced by the Indian economy. There was a conference of the foreign ministers in Colombo in January 1950 which gave birth to the Colombo Plan. The report of the Colombo Plan was published in November 1950. The Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru established the Planning Commission in March 1950. Jawaharlal Nehru himself became the chairman of the commission. The Planning Commission specified 3 objectives. All the citizens have the right to adequate income and adequate means of livelihood. The ownership of and control of material resources of the country are to be equally distributed and to serve the common good of the Indian people. The economic program will not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the detriment of common people. The idea of the planned economy was not new. The Indian National Congress had introduced in 1938 the National Planning Committee with Jawaharlal Nehru as its chairman. It functioned up to 1940. In 1944, the Bombay Plan was launched. The Planning Commission actually got inspiration from the Bombay Plan, but the whole strategy was framed under the framework and perspective of the Colombo Plan. The Colombo Plan insisted upon the concept of massive state intervention, mixed public and private sector enterprise, emphasis on heavy industries and need for foreign capital for enhancing the pace of the industrial growth in India. After the first general election, the first 5-year plan was published in December 1952 by the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. In time of declaring the Planning Commission, Jawaharlal Nehru asserted that India would try to achieve socialism without adhering to any doctrinaire definition of the word. Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis was appointed the statistical advisor of the first Planning Commission. He was actually the architect of the India's planned economy and planning in India. Mahalanobis argued that main aim of planning would be to eradicate poverty from India through continuous economic development by using scientific and technical knowledge. The Planning Commission formulated India's first 5-year plan for the period 1951-52 to 1955-56. The total plan outlay was rupees 2069 crores. India was an agricultural country and peasants formed the majority of the population. So, the first 5-year plan gave prime importance and put much emphasis on agricultural growth. Of the total public development expenditure, 17.5% was there for agriculture and community development, 8.1% for irrigation, 24% on transport and communication, 12.9% for multipurpose irrigation and power projects, and only 8.4% were allocated for industrial growth. In the first 5-year plan, foreign loan had been incorporated of about rupees 200 crores, and of that rupees 200 crores of foreign aid, 70% came from the United States of America and 17% came from the World Bank. The attempt to raise agricultural productivity without any fundamental change in the agrarian structure was a serious contradiction. Efforts to raise agricultural productivity within the framework of the old and traditional system was a serious contradiction in the agricultural growth of India. F.R. Frankel aptly observed that the great majority of the cultivators had no surplus for investment for improved technology, and the strategy and for that reason the entire strategy helped the big landowners and the interest of the small farmers were neglected. A large number of India's landless and those engaged in subsistence agriculture remained unemployed for a considerable length of time during the entire year. They had neither the incentive nor the capacity to carry out labor intensive production schemes that could increase yields within the traditional framework of the agricultural production. Sharecroppers had to pay 50% or more as rent, so it provided the most obvious problem of the agricultural growth in India during the first planning period. Another important aspect of the first 5-year plan was community development project. It was designed to stimulate the people's interest and people's pressure from below for social and economic reforms, but at the same time that would not hamper the prerogatives of the propertied classes. But the project was not a success. In fact, Jawaharlal Nehru, our first Prime Minister, also expressed his frustration about the prospect of the project because the men who were entrusted with the responsibility of bringing out the project to a success, they chose favorable spots and it lacked any development, and community development project did not come out very successful, though it was a very unique one prescribed by the Indian planners. According to a Nobel laureate economist, Gunnar Myrdal, popular participation in economic activity without changing the basic social and economic structure were essentially attempts to bypass the equality issue. Economic inequality increased and unemployment problem worsened gradually. However, one aspect of the first planning period was that India's national income had grown appreciably. At the time of independence, it was about rupees 8,850 crores and it rose to rupees 10,480 crores during the entire planned period. Agricultural production also increased, but it failed to keep pace with the increasing population, and hence there was a food scarcity had been faced by India. The food scarcity became so acute that the United States of America provided food aid to India since August 1956 on rupee payment under PL 480 scheme, that is Food for Peace program. The second 5-year plan period was 1956 to 1961. After 1955, the Planning Commission became virtually an extension of the Prime Minister's authority in the area of economic policy. This second plan had 4 specific objectives. 1. Sizable increase in national income with an idea of raising the standard of living of the Indian citizens. 2. Rapid industrialization with special emphasis on basic and heavy industries. 3. Increase in the employment opportunities. 4. Reduction of inequalities in income and wealth and more even distribution of economic power. Total outlay of the second plan was rupees 4,800 crores. The priority areas of the second plan was transport and communication, social services, irrigation, power, industry and mining, and these sectors would be the chief area of investment. Investment in agriculture and community development project declined from 14.8% to 11.8%, which affected the predominantly backward agricultural economy. The second plan saw a sharp decline in the foreign exchange position. In 1956, India's foreign exchange reserve was rupees 746 crores. But in 1961 it came down to rupees 250 crores. India was in dire need of foreign aid to fulfill its plan objectives, and at the initiative of the United States of America, Aid India Consortium was set in 1957 to provide the much needed loan to India. An important aim of the plan was industrial growth, but it failed to reach the target in steel, coal and cement productions. Industrial production increased no doubt, but as far as the target was concerned, it fell short at least to some extent. The aim of the second plan was to raise the national income by 25%, but the actual increase amounted to only 20%. The price of the essential commodities increased by 35% from 1956 to 1961. At the same time, during the second plan period, there was a steep rise in unemployment. In urban sector, there were 6.3 million unemployed, and in the rural sector, there were 9 million unemployed. The increase in employment opportunity failed to keep pace with the growth of labor force in the India of the late 1950s and early 1960s. The Mahalanobis Commission report was published in 1961. The Mahalanobis Committee report lamented that the benefits of the second 5-year plan was actually appropriated by the privileged classes and the men of wealth. Economic power was concentrated in the limited hands, but the plight of the poor and the downtrodden remained same and even deteriorated. The third 5-year plan period was between 1961 to 1966. By this time, our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru died in 1964. The third plan period was also a very ambitious one. By the early 1960s, the government of India failed to achieve its social goals of reducing economic disparity. From the very beginning, Jawaharlal Nehru emphasized on socialism and economic equality, but economic equality was far off. Aims of rapid industrialization also could not be fulfilled. There was industrialization, no doubt, heavy industries development in independent India during the planned periods, but it did not have the growth that was expected and which was in the target of the first and second 5-year plans. Growing corruption and economic mismanagement stood on the way of economic growth. Huge corruption came, and there was also economic mismanagement was there. So the first two plans could not become as success as was expected by the Indian rulers. Government performance was vehemently criticized by all the opposition parties, radical or conservative, regional or communal. Particularly, the rightist secular party Swatantra Party and the right-wing party Bharatiya Janasangh was bitterly critical of the Nehru government. In the midst of such a political and economic situation, the third 5-year plan was announced, which started from 1961. The objectives of the third 5-year plan, as the previous one, was to put emphasis on heavy industries. At the same time, self-sufficiency in food, grains and increase in agricultural production got priority to meet the requirements of the industry and export. This became inevitable because the country faced acute food shortage during the previous plan period, but in both agriculture and industrial productions, the achievement of the third plan fell far short of the target. From this perspective, the third plan was a failure. Prices of all commodities, particularly the essential commodities, increased by 36% during the third plan period compared to the previous one. Unemployment crisis in India also became acute. During the second plan period, there was an unemployment of 7.81 million of Indians. In 1961, that was the figure, but in 1966-67, unemployment rose to 9.6 millions of Indians. India's dependence on foreign capital also increased gradually. Foreign loan became a dire necessity for the Indian economy. The New York-based Herald Tribune wrote in 8 August 1962 that the World Bank provided another $1 billion towards India's economic development. The Barron's magazine of 15 July 1962 informed that India's liquid assets have been dropping inexorably to a new time low. So, crisis began to grip the Indian economy during the third plan as well. The process of economic development is not restricted to economic changes alone, but essentially a transportation of human agent and his social environment within which economic activity unfolds itself. But that was not done during the third plan period. Lack of driving forces and lack of political will stood on the way of solving basic problems faced by the nation. The declared objective of the government to promote a rapid rise in the standard of living also could not be achieved. Planning also failed to meet the basic demands of the people. People were deprived from right to work, people were deprived from the right to adequate income, people were deprived from the right to education, and they were also deprived from the right to insurances against sickness and other disabilities. But one important aspect during the planned economy of India should obviously be mentioned. During the first 5-year plan, India began to import from the foreign market the consumer goods. But during the second plan, there was some increase in the industrial growth, so India concentrated on importing capital goods from foreign market as industrial production increased at least to some extent. One of the most important aspects of the Nehruvian economy was that Jawaharlal Nehru personally, as the Prime Minister, emphasized on the development of higher education in independent India. Jawaharlal Nehru built institutes for higher education, particularly for scientific and technological development, and scientific and technical education got high priority on behalf of the Nehruvian government. Several IITs were founded in several metropolitan cities. Moreover, Jawaharlal Nehru took initiative to establish Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in New Delhi, and he also founded Atomic Energy Commission after consulting the eminent scientists like Bhabha and Sarabhai. As the British imperialism left India, it left the Indian economy in shambles. It was the duty of the Indian rulers, particularly the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, to minimize the problems faced by the Indian economy. So Nehru took the path of a planned economy, and he was influenced by the Colombo Plan, and also he was influenced by the Indian Planning Committee founded in 1938 and the Bombay Plan launched in 1944. The plans were not always a success, but they gave, in the first plan there was emphasis on agriculture, in the second plan there were emphasis on industry, and in third plan there were many other things more. But Nehruvian policy and planned economy could not eradicate poverty from India, and it could not ensure equality among the Indian citizens. But Jawaharlal Nehru gave much importance to the development of science and technology, and institutes of higher education were founded in several places of India. But at the same time, that amount of attention was not paid for primary education in India. On the whole, Nehruvian era of planned economy was an attempt to strengthen the foundations of the Indian economy. Thank you.